Jackson. I'm the president of the African American Genealogy Group of Kentucky. If you're not a member, please go to AAGGKY.org and please join. If you are a member, please think about joining some of our committees. We have ad hoc committees of finance and bylaws, and we have other committees of programming, publicity. We have focus on websites, community engagement. So if you are members, please contact us and volunteer to serve on committees. We need your help to keep our organization alive and spread the word to other people in your communities. At this time, I will hand it over to Denise to introduce our fabulous speaker for today.
Okay. Did you want to announce next month's?
Oh, you can do that. You can do
Okay.
that.
All right. Let me do that first before I introduce Melissa. Next month, November 16th, we'll have Frank X. Walker as the presenter. It will be a hybrid presentation, and he'll be live at the Boone County Main Public Library in Burlington, Kentucky. And that will begin at 1 o'clock. And you'll also receive an invitation to sign on to Zoom for those of you who are out of town. Okay, Melissa Barker is joining us today. She's a certified archives manager and public historian, currently working at the Houston County, Tennessee Archives and Museum. She's affectionately known as the Archive Lady. She lectures, teaches, and writes about the genealogy research process, researching in archives, and records preservation. Melissa conducts virtual webinar presentations across the United States for genealogical and historical societies. She writes a popular blog entitled A Genealogist in the Archives, and I'll place that link in chat. And she's a well-known genealogy book reviewer. Melissa has been a professional genealogist for 21 years with an expertise in Tennessee records. She is also on the board of the Kentucky Genealogical Society. She's been researching her own family history for the past 35 years. And today she's presenting to us, It's Not Online. I can't remember the rest of the title, but welcome, Melissa.
Thank you, Denise. I'm going to share my screen. Thank you so much for having me today. Can you see that okay, Denise? Okay. And like they said, please mute your mics so that there's no interruptions. And I will take any questions at the end. So today we're going to talk about It's Not All Online, Researching in Archives. As Denise pointed out in my introduction, I've been doing genealogy research for going on 35 years now. 20 of those years, I've been a professional genealogist. I operated my own genealogy research firm. And 14 years ago, I was tapped to help to start our archives here in Houston County. Houston County, Tennessee was formed in 1871. Our records had never been archived or organized. And so there's a whole long story that goes with how we started our archives. But I like to say that our archives was formed from a murder that happened in 1921, although we started our archives in 2010. I became an archivist 13 years ago, went back to school at the age of 42. And it's interesting going from being a genealogist researching in archives to being an archivist working with genealogists. And so in 2015, I realized there was a lot about archives, records, and research that genealogists just did not know, or they were intimidated by, or just did not know how to navigate. So I started speaking, teaching, and writing because I'm extremely passionate about archives, all archives, anywhere where there's records. Because as genealogists and researchers of any kind, we should be using these records. And what a lot of researchers and genealogists don't realize, especially some of the newer ones, is that it's not all online. And so we need to keep that in mind as we're doing our research. So statistics say that there is about 5% of the world's geological records that are online. I honestly think that's more like a 3%. Because I work in archives, I talk to archivists all the time, and these records that are online are fantastic. There are records coming online every day. However, the majority of our genealogical records that we need to access are still sitting on shelves in boxes at the various archives across the United States and across the world. And so we don't need to get lulled into the fact that we can just, whatever's online is what's there, and that's all that there is, because there is so much more to be found. So I believe that statistic is a lot less. This is actually a photograph of the Dickson County, Tennessee archives and their records vault. And the reason I'm showing this picture is because, as a visual, the books that you see on the very, very far wall, all of those books have been digitized and you can access those on Family Search. But the rest of the shelves with boxes filled with records, none of that has been digitized. None of that's online. You have to actually work with this archives to see those records or get copies of the records. And so if you're doing genealogy research, once you have completed what you can find online, you've got to start looking in these archives. Many of you have seen probably this graphic. It is done by Elizabeth Gorel. This is courtesy of the California Genealogical Society. This depicts what I'm talking about. This is an iceberg. And you see the white part where it says internet. That's about how much of the genealogical records are actually online. Very, very small amount. The rest of the records that we need to be doing research in are located in our various archives, libraries, courthouses, museums, university archives, historical societies, genealogical societies. And they show this as being underwater because many genealogists do not realize that it's out there. Here's another example. This goes back to about 2016, but to me, it's a great example. This is the Murray County, Tennessee archives, and there was a newspaper article in the Columbia Daily Herald that says that they had processed 2.5 million records, which is phenomenal. But then it says they had a backlog of 4 million records in storage. I can tell you that most archives have records in storage that they have a backlog that they haven't processed. They probably haven't even touched in years. That's why your research is never done. That's why you've got to get out there and work with these archives and wherever these records are located to find your family records. This is an old picture of the Tennessee State Library and Archives. We actually have a new Tennessee State Library and Archives that some of you may know about. But I'm showing you this old building from about 1953, just not too soon after this particular building was built. I attended the Archives Institute here as a 3-year course to become certification in archives management. And while I was going to school there, they asked us if we would like to take a tour of the Tennessee Supreme Court records, which is a massive, massive collection of records dating back to the founding of Tennessee all the way up to close to present day. There are over 10,000 boxes of records in this collection dating back from 1809 to 1950. So we went on an elevator, went up to the top floor, which I'm showing you by these red arrows. We stepped off the elevator, and as far as my eyes could see, all I saw were shelves full of boxes. We actually got to work on some of the Tennessee Supreme Court records as part of my class study. The point is that many archives have such storage areas. If you have Tennessee ancestors and you think possibly they had a court, some kind of a court proceeding that went to the Tennessee Supreme Court records, I can tell you that the TSLA actually processes these records, and then they have an index on their website. If you go to that index and you find something of interest to you, you can order the records and they will send you copies in the mail. So that's a great resource. But my point is that these kinds of buildings have records everywhere. So there's a myth out there that says all of our genealogical records are online. And I find this to be true with many new genealogists that are just getting started, that all they've ever known is digital research or online research. I started in 1990 where there was hardly anything online of genealogical records. So I was having to do research at archives. Most of my own ancestors are not from the South. They're not from Tennessee. They're from West Virginia, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Maryland, all points north. So I've had to do a lot of distance research. And it can be done. Many people say, well, I can't travel, so I can't do research. Yes, you can. It takes more time. You have to have more patience to do distance research, but it can be done. I've been very, very successful with my own genealogical research for the past 34 years doing distance research. But it takes writing letters, it takes writing emails, phone calls, maybe even contacting the repositories through their website, through their social media pages. And so, but it can be done. So don't let the fact you can't travel deter you from doing your research. Many genealogists have been lulled into thinking that they can stay up till 3 o'clock in the morning with their fuzzy slippers and pajamas on and do all of their genealogy research, and they think they're doing a reasonably exhaustive search. It's simply not true. Again, there are a tremendous amount of records online. There's a lot coming online, but there are so much more that we need to be accessing in archives. And I'm going to show you some real good examples of that. So what is reasonably exhaustive research? There's no one specific definition for this term, for this statement. It is the first listed element in the genealogy proof standard. If you only have done online research, you have not done a reasonably exhaustive research. So it's my opinion that research on our ancestors can never be deemed complete, ever. The reason being is because if you think about it, there are records sitting in people's attics and basements and outbuildings and in government buildings and all kinds of places that haven't been accessed. They probably don't even know they're there until they're found and then donated to an archives. So our genealogy research is never, ever complete. So what is the first step of doing genealogy research that is not online? Well, you need to know your locations. First and foremost, you've got to know where your ancestors were from, where they lived, because that's where we're going to find the records. You need to locate archives. And the building or the organization may not have the word archive in their title or archive on their building. If they have records and they are processing them, if they're making available to the public, they are a type of archive. So that could be a historical society, a genealogical society, university library and archives. I find genealogists don't seem to know that those exist or don't use them as much as they should. Museums, and then there's also private collections. So we have to find where the records are located. Also, when you look at the world map, there are so many archives. I like to say that there's an archives for everything out there. Did you know that the Hallmark greeting card business has an archive of their own? They say you can contact them and they'll help you date an old greeting card, but they have an archive. There's archives out there for everything. And so we as genealogists need to be looking for any and all archives that we can find. So where do we start? We start at the local level. I tell people to get as locally specific, very first thing as possible, because that's where your ancestors lived. They lived in a community, in a city, in a county. So you need to get to the local level. I encourage people, whatever state you're researching in, to get a county map. Now, keep in mind, these county boundaries have changed over time. I would encourage you to study those county boundaries. When you find what counties your ancestors have lived in, you need to study those boundaries, because it may be that the records you're looking for are in a neighboring county because they were part of the other county years ago. But start locally, get down to the county, get down, if it's a large county or a large city, get down to the community level, the city level, because that's where you're going to find the records. Here is a map of Tennessee. This is actually from the Archives Development Directory on the Tennessee State Library Archives website. Tennessee is a unique state in that they try very, very hard to get a county archive in every 95 counties in Tennessee. We have 95 counties. Last time I checked with our state archivist, I think 77 of them have county archives. So where that red star is where I'm located. And we have a county archives, which was established in 2010. But many of these archives have been established for many years. They have records that date back into the 1800s. Stewart County, which is near us, where the Battle of Fort Donelson took place, where the city of Dover is, they have an interesting setup where they have their records dating back to 1803. Now, anyone who has ever done research in that area knows that their courthouse was burned during the Civil War, during the Battle of Fort Donelson. But the rest of the story is that at the time, when the Union was going to burn the courthouse, the community asked them, begged them, said, please let us take the records out of the courthouse before you burn it. And believe it or not, the Union let them do that. So they removed the records, put them in a cave for safekeeping, And of course, the Union burned the courthouse, but that saved their records. So many people hear that Stewart County's courthouse burned, so there's no records. That's not true. The Stewart County Archives have records dating back to 1803. So never believe that all records are gone if you hear about a burned courthouse or some kind of record loss. Again, start at the record level. I'm going to go back. On this particular map, if you go to the website, it's clickable. So if you want to find an archive in one of these counties, you just click on it and then it'll bring up this information page. This is for the archives where I work. It gives you their physical address, mailing address, phone number, how to contact them, email, a website. Look at the physical holdings down there. I have listed there some of our, it's not everything, but some of our physical holdings and our hours of operation. A great resource when you're doing research in a particular area. So first and foremost, you're going to need to know the specifics of the state, the city where your ancestors live. Some great online sources that will help you with that. One, which many of you may remember that nobody's talking about anymore, is the U.S. GenWed project. It's totally free, totally operated by volunteers, and it's organized by state and then within that state by county. And if you go to those web pages, there's tons of information there about what archives they may have, and what kind of records they may have. And many of these websites actually digitize and put records there or put indexes or finding aids there. The other one is the Family History Research Wiki. The wiki actually is a great place to locate local repositories, archives, libraries. And so you go to familysearch.org, you're going to click on the search. It's going to be a drop-down menu. You're going to see the term wiki. And then in the search bar, once you get on the wiki, you put in the city, the county, and the state you want to find a repository. So each location page will give you references and links to websites, contact information, and information about those archives. So here is the wiki page. You see that search bar there. And then once you put your city, county, and state, to find the archive, and then you'll find what you're looking for. So each location page will give you references and links to those websites. So this is a picture of the Houston County Courthouse. Our archives is located where I work in the basement of this courthouse. I've got a little red arrow pointing to the basement. They always put archives in the basement. But we actually have a very nice facility down there. We're actually planning a move in the next year or two to a larger place. But for right now, we are very thankful for the space our county provides. This is the U.S. GenWed project. If you go there, you can click for a particular state, and then within that state, you can click a particular county, and there's a whole website for that county. There's a clickable map. You can go there, click whatever state you're researching in, and then click within there to find the county you're particularly interested in. Here's one for Florida. Actually, you can click on the link there and then click on the county that you're going to do research. So each county page, there'll be a listing of records, archives, libraries, historical societies, genealogical societies, maybe there's a college archives or a museum, government record sources, great place to find that information. Another phenomenal place to find information like this is on Cindy's List. If you've never heard of Cindy's List, I would encourage you to go there. Cindy's List is actually operated by a real person. Her name is Cindy, and she's been doing this for over 20 years. She's been gathering online links to websites and repositories, and she lists them by location. So they're categorized and cross-referenced, indexed to genealogical resources, which include archives, historical societies, museums, and things like that. It's a great place to find these repositories that have the records that we're looking for. And she updates this particular list on a daily basis, and she operates the whole thing by herself. I don't know when she sleeps. So before you drive or before you fly or before you travel to that archive, there are some important things you need to remember. Any of you that are going to listen to this, you may have experienced some of this. These are actually a couple of pictures from my husband's family. The one there on the left is his grandparents. I love this picture of that car. And then his dad was a pilot. But before you travel, you really do need to think of some things. So contact, you cannot emphasize enough. You need to contact wherever it is you're going to go visit, whether it's an archive, a library, historical society. You need to contact them and let them know you're coming, because they may not be open the day you're going to be there. Their website may say that they're open, but maybe they had some sort of a water incident and they had to close because they had to clean it up. Or maybe they're all volunteer staff, and for some reason, none of the volunteers can show up that day. So you really need to call them, email them, and let them know you're coming and verify that they're going to be open. So find out their contact information. You can find them that information on their website, their social media pages. Hopefully somewhere online you can find that information. So call or email them. I would encourage you to do both. Email them, let them know you're coming, maybe even set up an appointment. Many of our repositories are now requiring appointments. I've noticed that since COVID, that a lot of them are starting to do this. I think they had to do that as they were coming out of COVID and they really liked the idea. So they've kept that in place. And so you may actually have to have an appointment. So make sure that you know their days and hours of operation. When do they close for lunch, or do they close for lunch? In my archives, we're open Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30, but we close our doors and we leave for lunch between noon and 1. You want to know that so that you don't show up on their doorstep and they're closed, especially if you're traveling. One of the things that I encourage genealogists to do is when you contact them, let them know what you're going to be researching. Don't give them the 5-hour speech about what you're researching on the Smith family. Let them know that you're coming to look at particular records. If you actually get on their website and you find something in their indexes or in their finding aids, let them know, because many of us as archivists will pull these records even before you get there and have them ready for you when you get there. It makes it easier on us because when you're there, we may have other researchers that were helping as well. And so when you show up, we don't want to have to go pull records. So if you can let us know in advance, we can have those records pulled and waiting for you so that when you get there, you are ready to do research. One thing I find genealogists or researchers don't think about when they're going to an archive or a repository, that is parking. Believe it or not, that's one thing that I hear people talk about all the time, that they didn't realize the parking situation. So when you're contacting the archive, ask them about their parking. I'm showing you, again, the picture of this old picture of the Tennessee State Library and Archives because the parking there was very, very limited. This was in downtown Nashville, Tennessee, right behind the Capitol building. And there was about 10 parking spaces for researchers. Now, this is in downtown Nashville, Tennessee, and only 10 spaces were available for those who were coming in to do research. The yellow arrows were showing you where you could park. You could not park over there where the red X is. And so now I told you we have a new building, a new Tennessee State Library and Archives. They had wonderful forethought. They built the building and they have a 150 parking space garage underneath the new building. So we are very excited about that. But parking could be an issue. What if you have limitations? What if you have a disability? What if you can't walk very far? If you couldn't find a place to park in these 10 spaces here, the next place for you to park was in a parking garage that was down the street on the next block, and you had to go up a very steep hill to get to this building. So you need to know about parking. Indexes. Thankfully, many of our archives have started to put indexes on their website. I know that during COVID, many of us who worked in the archives field, whether we worked in our buildings or not, we were still working. So what were we doing? We were actually doing a lot of indexing. And so many of these indexes are now coming online on their websites. So check for those indexes. Now, one thing you'll have to overcome is an archives website. I can say this because I am an archivist. I don't know why, but archivists make it very difficult for you to find things on their websites. I don't know if it's because there is so much on their website, but it's hard to find what you're looking for. So you're going to have to dig, you're going to have to click to find these indexes, these finding aids, even digital records on their website. But if you find indexes and you find references to your family or records that you want to look at, be sure and mention that to the archivist when you contact them and letting them know you're coming for a visit. Or if you can't visit, then you can actually send to them, I found this on your index. Could you digitize the records and send them to me? Be prepared. You may have to pay for copy fees or for a search fee, but look for those indexes. It will actually save you some time. And so if you find information in an index, write it down. Keep very good notes. Keep a research log if you can. I know that this helps me from doing duplicate research, but also write the information down. And then when you visit the repository, or if you're talking to them by email or telephone, you can let them know what you found, and maybe they can pull that information for you, scan it and send it to you, or make copies and mail it to you. Make a to-do list. I encourage genealogists to make a to-do list. There's a couple of reasons why. If you're going to be researching in person, if you have your to-do list in front of you, you can stay focused. I don't know about you, but sometimes when I go to do research, I kind of get overwhelmed by the amount of information, the amount of records, the building itself. A lot of times they're in beautiful buildings. If you have your to-do list, then you can stay focused and you can get completed what you come there to get completed. Also on your to-do list, make sure and put down types of records you want to look at, and I'm going to go over a few of those in just a second. There are particular types of record collections you definitely want to access when you're working with an archives, and a lot of these kinds of records are not online. And so your to-do list will also save you time. If you're traveling, if you're going to the building, many of us only have so much time to spend there. I get phone calls from people who are coming in to do research all the time, and they're going to say, I'm only can be there that day. I can only be there for a certain amount of hours. So the to-do list will keep you on track and use your time wisely. And so maybe you can be very successful with your research. So you can't travel. I've already mentioned this, but it's okay if you can't travel. Many of us can't travel. Many of us are so busy, all we can do is get up, go to work, come home, eat, and go to bed and do it again. So, but you doesn't mean you still can't do genealogy research. Again, there's a lot of records coming online. There's so much we can do research online. However, there's still going to be records you're going to need to access at an archive. So for some of us, traveling is just not an option. And so one of the things we need to do is that we need to work with these archives to see what kind of records they have. You can do this from home. Like I said, I've been doing it for 34 years. I started out writing a lot of letters, actually typing letters. One of my tricks, I still type letters sometimes, but one of my tricks with sending an actual letter is this. I would type up my letter, my request, and I keep it very short, very specific what I'm wanting, but I would include a self-addressed stamped envelope. This was extremely, extremely successful when I wrote Write to Funeral Homes. I have written to hundreds of funeral homes for records. I would include a self-addressed stamped envelope. And if I wrote a letter today, I would still do the same thing. What this does, it's kind of a mental game. I think they kind of think they have to reply to you because you went to all the trouble of including a self-addressed stamped envelope. And so I can only count on my hand maybe one or two times where I did not get a response when I included a self-addressed stamped envelope. So if you're sending out letters or if you're requesting them in that manner, include a self-addressed envelope. I think you'll be surprised that you'll get a response. You may get a response that says we don't have any records, but I always got something back from the repository when I did that. So again, call and email the repository. I would do both, actually. I would email them, let them know when you're coming. If they respond to you, that's great that they know you're coming. I would even call a day or two before I'm supposed to be there and make double sure they're going to be open and that this is their hours and they do have these records, because sometimes it can get lost in translation. When you are making a request, be specific. Again, nobody wants to hear about all of your research. I know you're excited about it, and I try to be excited about it with my patrons, with my genealogists that come in, but you have to remember that we are working with more than just you. We have other researchers in the building, or we're answering emails, or we're answering phone calls. This is specifically true when it comes to working with government offices. Those offices that are doing the work of today, but they have the old records as well. If you start telling them your family history, you're going to lose them. They're not going to want to help you. So be as specific as you possibly can with your research request. Do not make the mistake of asking for everything for the Smith family because you're not going to get it. If you put it in an email, you probably will never hear from them again. If you call them on the phone, they're going to tell you, well, I need to be more specific. Call us back when you have the specifics. Do not make this mistake. Yes, we do want everything for whatever family it is we're researching, but we need to do it in a very deliberate manner and we need to have specifics. The more specific you are, the more the staff will be able to help you. They will know exactly where to go to find the records. If you've been on their website and you know the index or the type of record where this information is located, you can tell them that and then they can have it for you when you show up in person, or they can send it to you by email or by mail. And I can't emphasize enough that you have to be patient. Now, genealogists are not known for their patience. They want what they want and they want it now. But we may have to be patient, especially if you're doing distance research. You have to wait longer for responses. You may even have to contact them and remind them, hey, I've sent this request. Where are we with my request? What's the status? If you are in person, there may be other researchers there and you may have to wait. Another reason why that it's important to call ahead and make an appointment or to let them know you're coming is because many of our archives have records that are stored off of the grounds of where their archives is located. They may have another storage site where they have to go retrieve those records, and it may take them a day or two to go get them. So that's why it's important that we contact them early on before we actually go there. A few years ago, I actually toured the National Archives that is located in Fort Worth, Texas. My in-laws live in Fort Worth, so we were going for a visit, and I said, oh, I want to go visit this archives. You all know about the National Archives in Washington, D.C. Well, they have what I call satellite archives in several states, and one of them is in Fort Worth. So I decided I would wanted a tour of the facility. So I contacted the archivist and I said, I'm coming in. This is the dates I'll be there. Can I get a tour of your facility? And I set this up months in advance because I knew when I was coming. And they were very, very nice. We set it up. I even called a couple days ahead to make sure that it was still available, that we could still do it. And I showed up on that day and they were very nice, showed me a complete tour of the facility. If you didn't know, there was a room, a huge room that they would not allow me to go in because that's where they stored IRS tax returns. So if you ever wanted to know where your tax return is, it's in the National Archives in Fort Worth, Texas. Archives receive many requests, either by email, through their social media pages, through their websites, even through the mail, and from people who walk in. And so your request is important to them, but you may have to wait or, like I said, call in advance, talk to them in advance, and maybe something they can do for you and email to you or send copies in the mail. Many of our archives are understaffed due to budget cuts, due to all kinds of reasons. A lot of our archives are operated by nothing but volunteers. And so that day you're coming in, maybe only one volunteer can come in. So please be patient and understanding to that. Again, many of our archives are operated by volunteers. This is one of my volunteers that I had a few years ago, but they are fantastic. I love our volunteers. Anyone who volunteers for an archives should be commended because they do fantastic work. Many of our volunteers work hard. They're very passionate about what they do. They love working with patrons and genealogists and researchers. And so they are volunteering out of the kindness of their hearts. They don't have to be there. They don't get paid to be there. And so be nice to them and help them to get the records that you need. Say thank you. Thank you. Before you leave, say thank you, or in an email, say thank you, especially if they've gone above and beyond. Many of our volunteers and even our archive staff will go above and beyond what you've even asked. And so be sure to thank them. I have been known to send thank you cards to the archive staff, especially if they've helped me, if I've been maybe a little difficult because I didn't know what I was looking for. And so do that. I put their chocolate is encouraged. I don't say that anymore, not since COVID, but I have gotten gifts in the archives by some of my researchers. And so that's nice. It's not expected. It's not required, but a thank you goes a long, long way. So I want to move now to some unique records that are typically not online. So this is the good stuff. This is where I'm going to talk about records that we as genealogists, as any kind of a researcher, should be accessing at archives. It is literally impossible for me to list all the different kinds of records that are not online or not represented 100% online. And so I'm only going to talk about a few that I think are some of the most important. First are vertical files or subject files, or in some cases, they're called morgue files. These are the only way I know to describe these records are they're a hodgepodge of records that are filed in filing folders and then filed in filing cabinets. They could contain literally just about anything. There should be an index. That index could be on the archive's website, on an in-house computer, or you may have to ask when you get there or when you email them for the index. The index is going to be arranged by surname or subject name. And the kinds of subjects you might find are a file on a particular church, a file on a particular local store, a file on a particular event that happened locally. And of course, surnames are self-explanatory. Should find your surname pretty easily in an index. Things that can be found in vertical files. I have found all kinds of wonderful things in vertical files. You can find one-of-a-kind documents. I've seen original birth certificates, original death certificates, original photographs in vertical files. You just don't know what you're going to find in them until you open up that file. Manuscript collections. I find that manuscript collections is probably the #1 underused records collections by genealogists. And I believe it's because they either don't know about them, maybe they're intimidated by them, they don't know how to navigate them. That's why since 2015, I've been teaching and speaking and writing about researching in archives and archived records, because I'm trying to teach genealogists about these different kinds of records collections and how to use them. So a manuscript collection, this is how I describe a manuscript collection to a genealogist or a layperson. Some of you may have worked in archives, so you know what this is, but this is how I describe it to them. I want you to think about all of your genealogical records that you have in your possession. That could be copies of census records, vital records. Maybe it's a diary, a scrapbook. Maybe you have a quilt that your grandmother made or your mother's wedding dress. Maybe you have a lock of hair from a family member. Take all of those materials, put them in boxes, take it down to a local archive and donate it. That is a manuscript collection. Literally anything can be in a manuscript collection. I have found so much more from my ancestors in a manuscript collection than I have in any other records collection. These are normally almost always donated to a repository. They could be a collection of records from an individual, from an entire family, from a business, from a civic organization, a social organization. And so they're going to be in boxes, in file folders. I think this is a must records collections for genealogists to access. Sadly, majority of these records collections are not digitized and available online. Many of the finding aids are online, but not the entire collection digitized. So here's an example of a small manuscript collection. This is the Lyle Family Records Collection. They actually owned a local mercantile in the community. So there's a ledger book there at the bottom right. There's scrapbooks, there's newspaper clippings, photographs, programs, you name it, it is there. None of this is digitized and online, only can be accessed at my archive. And then there's tons, if not thousands, tens of thousands of these types of collections in all kinds of archives. This is the kind of stuff we're looking for as genealogists. Loose court records. These are phenomenal records. What are loose court records? Well, many of us understand and have done research in the bound volumes of court records, such as court docket books or court minute books, and they're fantastic. But those minute books, those bound volumes, don't tell the whole story. Those are normally synopsises of the court cases or brief entries of the court case. The rest of the records and the information you are going to want are what are called loose records. So these are the working papers or the accompanying papers that go with the court case you find in that bound volume. These are going to be archived separately from the bound volumes in file folders and in boxes. There should be an index that has been done of these records. And so if you find something in a docket book or a minute book, then you ask the archivist or the Genealogical Society member, do you have any loose records associated with this case? What are you going to find in these loose records? You're going to find things like affidavits, subpoenas, witness testimonies, and a whole lot more. So here's an example. This is a probate file. Now, that's probably a probate file is one of the more well-known type of manuscript collections that genealogists know about. But many of them only look at the bound volumes, get that information, and they stop there. They don't know that these records exist. So this is W.V. Pulley's loose probate file. And as you can see, it's just as described. It's loose papers that are in a file folder. And it's all of the original working papers from his probate process. So what you find in the bound volumes, again, is not the whole story. Next is scrapbooks. I love scrapbooks. I love them. I've actually been known to travel to go look at scrapbooks, even if they had nothing to do with my family members, because to me, they are the most fascinating things to look at. They're all individual, one of a kind, because they were put together by individuals. They are like a time capsule. You just don't know what you're going to find until you open them up. There are all kinds of, I do a whole presentation on scrapbooks because there are so many different kinds of scrapbooks out there. And so you may find that many of our archives have scrapbooks, and that's wonderful. Many of these they're not going to be indexed, they're not going to be digitized for the most part. So you'll need to access them or have the archivist access it for you and see if there's something in there you're looking for. You're going to find one of a kind records in these. I've again found original birth certificates pasted into the scrapbooks, original death certificates, marriage records, photographs, all kinds of wonderful things pasted into scrapbooks. One of the more popular types of scrapbooks are newspaper clipping scrapbooks. Why is this important when you can access the newspapers online or on microfilm? I don't know if you've ever had this happen to you, but I have in the past been looking for a particular newspaper issue, a particular volume, a particular issue. I've looked on microfilm and that one issue is not there. It was not saved, it wasn't preserved, it wasn't digitized, it wasn't microfilmed. But maybe, just maybe, someone locally clipped out the information, some obituaries, some marriage announcements, and pasted it into their scrapbook. That is why these are so very important to have. Oral histories. Believe it or not, many of our archives have oral histories, and they have them in different forms. They have them in audio form, video form. Maybe they have them just in a transcription form or a written form. Oral histories are very, very important to us as genealogists because you're going to find things in an oral history that you can't find written in any other record. I would encourage you to be careful about listening and to documenting oral histories. They may not be 100% accurate. However, take that information, build on it, use it as a guide to find other information. But oral histories can be found in archives. And so, like I said, contact the archivist, look on their websites to see if they have an index of their oral histories. What kind of form are they in? If they're still in a VHS form, maybe they haven't been transferred over. My archives right now, we are in the middle of transferring over all of our oral histories. We had over 50 oral histories that our Historical Society had done on our World War II veterans. We've been able to digitize those. We have local people who've just sat down and talked about their experience living in the area. So we're starting to digitize those. Many of our archives are starting to digitize their oral histories. And so look for those in archives because maybe you can't find one where your own ancestor did a history, but you may find that someone locally talked about your ancestor or talked about going to the same school that they went to or went to the same business or lived in the same street. So oral histories are very, very important to us as genealogists. Photographs. Photographs are something that archives all have. Now, photographs are actually one of the first records collections that archives will actually digitize and try to get out there to the public. And the reason being is because that will attract researchers to their facilities. Many archives, some of you may know this, we have budget people that we have to answer to. And so many times we're asked the question, how many visitors have you had? Those are statistics we keep up with. How many visitors have we had? How many people have contacted us? What kind of researchers have you had? A lot of statistics we keep up with to report to those who hold the purse strings. And so photographs will actually draw people to an archive. So if you put those out there, which a lot of archives do, they have digitized photographs on their websites, or they share them on their social media pages to entice you to come to their archives or to do research. But many of them are still sitting in archives that haven't been digitized yet. So we all have photographs in our archives. And so maybe there are photographs of your ancestors there. I would encourage you actually to ask about unidentified photographs. All archives have unidentified photographs. And if you have photographs of your ancestors and you go to a repository or to an archive, take them with you or have them on your phone and compare them to the unidentified photographs. It'll do two things. It'll help the archives if you can identify some photographs, but it will also help you because then you'll have additional photographs of your ancestors. So photographs are absolutely wonderful things to find online, but there's probably so much more sitting in an archive. Maps. Many of our archives have robust map collections. Many of these don't get online very often because of their size. They're difficult to digitize. Many times if they're farmed out to get digitized by a particular company, they're very expensive. So many of our archives don't have the budget to do that. And there's many types of maps out there. And so talk to the archives about what kind of maps they have and why should we as genealogists be interested in maps. Because many times our ancestors lived in these areas and either they moved around or many times there's been district changes. Local districts may have changed over time and every so many years they start changing districts, they remap or they move the boundary lines. And so this may affect your research. And so maps are actually very important. There also may be property assessing maps or plat maps or road maps. If you know the road your ancestor lived on from a census record, you might be able to map them out on a road map. I'm horrible with maps. I say that I'm directionally challenged. I'm horrible at reading maps. But I tried to find where my ancestors lived by looking at maps. And then that will help you to actually figure out maybe what local one-room schoolhouse they went to that was nearby or what church that they were affiliated with. And so maps are actually a very important part of our genealogical research. This is one of my favorite maps. It's not a traditional map, but it's one of my favorites. It is actually from 2002. Frances Henson hand draw this map of her memories of the town of Danville. Danville is in Houston County. In 1943, Tennessee Valley Authority or TVA actually flooded the town of Danville to create Kentucky Lake. Houston County actually dead ends into Kentucky Lake. If you come into Houston County and you get on 147 and you take 147 all the way down to the lake, that highway 147 turns into the boat dock, which means if you don't turn, you would drive right into Kentucky Lake. And that is no lie. But in 1943, they flooded and created Kentucky Lake, which means they flooded all of the area that you see in this map. Now, TVA came in, they tore down every single building except for the one at the very far left corner, which is a grain elevator. It is still sticking out of Kentucky Lake. If you go there, you can see it plain as day. So this is why I love this map, because it's so well drawn. It's not drawn to scale. It shows the railroad going through. But these kind of maps are also can be found in archives, things that people remember. This is almost like an oral history, but in map form. Ledger books. Ledger books of all kinds are in archives. People kept ledger books for all different kinds of reasons. Maybe they owned a store, and so they have a store ledger books. Well, in a store ledger book, they usually would list their shoppers by name in their ledger book, especially if they were purchasing, putting things on account. That's kind of ledger you want to look at to find your ancestor. A lumberyard ledger book, a doctor's ledgers. I actually just received 2 ledgers for a local doctor who kept up with his accounts in these ledger books that date back to the 1800s. You may find your ancestors in there. You may find he recorded where he helped to birth a baby in that family. Ledger books are very important. School ledgers, Sunday school ledgers, church ledgers. If you don't know if they have them, just talk to the archivist, a historical society member, ask them, do you have any ledger books? These can be very beneficial. These particular ledger books that I'm showing you here came from the Campground Cumberland Presbyterian Church. These are Sunday school ledgers. These did not get donated by the church. These actually were in the possession of an individual, and when their papers were donated to the archives, these were amongst them. And so you just never know where records are going to be found. Records can be found anywhere and everywhere. So many genealogists think they're done with their research, or they think, I'm never going to find anything else. I have found everything I'm going to ever find. Well, that's not true, because as I'm talking to you right now, there are records sitting in attics and basements and closets and drawers and abandoned government buildings, all kinds of places. I have people walking into my archives on a weekly basis donating records, items, memorabilia, artifacts that they have found in their homes. Maybe a loved one has passed away, and so they're cleaning out the house, and they bring this to me. I am the only entity in our county that is collecting and preserving our local history, and so I get everything. And honestly, I'm known for not refusing very much. I don't have a whole lot of room, but I'm afraid that if I refuse something, then the next thing they look at, they'll think, well, she didn't want that, but so she probably doesn't want this. I'm trying very hard to collect and preserve our local history because so much of it has been thrown away over the years. So if you are having issues with your research, if you can't find a particular piece of information, all I can tell you is to be patient and wait. I encourage genealogists to always periodically check back with the archives where you've researched before. They may have received a donation of more records since you've been there or since you talked to them that include more records for your family. There are always records being discovered in places and then donated. And so do not think that you're done. Do not give up. I am a glass is half full kind of person. I'm thinking that I'm going to find even more records from my ancestors. They're just sitting somewhere that haven't been found yet. So keep that in mind. So here's an example of that. Nina Finley was our county historian for decades. And she was one of those people that you could mention a surname to, and 3 hours later, she is still telling you about that family. She had a wealth of knowledge. She passed away in 2014. A few weeks later, her son calls me and asks if we would like to have her research records out of her attic. And we said, yes, we would love to have it. What I didn't realize is that it would take 2 truckloads to get it to us. This is just a photograph of some of it. This is what I call fresh from the attic. It's in the original boxes that were in her attic. We found dead bugs, dead rodents. We actually had to, rebox everything, go through everything and clean. But it is her research. She kept tons of research on our local community and many, many of the families that lived here. So a true treasure trove that we received. This particular photograph is an interesting one. I'm a county archivist. And so as the county archivist, I'm also our county records manager, which means I work with each and every county department to deal with their old records. Well, our local highway department was moving into a new building. Then they said, we have some of these old records that are stored up in this loft area. What do I need to do with them? So it was up to me to go and to look through these records. Unfortunately, they were up in this loft area, and I was not going to go up there and see what it was. So they got a big forklift piece of machinery, and they brought all of the records down to the floor where I could go through them. So you never know where you're going to find records. Again, never know. So you need to get researching, but researching online is wonderful. I do it all the time too, and you should too. Scour the internet, find what you can, but don't stop there. Don't think that that's all. There was going to come a time where you're going to have to go to a brick and mortar building, or at least talk to them through email, through their social media pages, by the phone, about what records that they have. Don't be afraid or intimidated to work with an archives by email, telephone, or in person. They are there to help you. You may not know what you're looking for, but we'll help you navigate that. Just try to be as specific as you can with your requests. Let us know the surnames. And one thing that happens with archivists is when I have worked with a researcher and they have left, they've gone back home, or I'm not emailing with them much anymore. their surnames will stick in my brain. And as we get records donated and as we go through those records, processing those records, there have been times in the past where a surname will just jump off the page at me and tell me, wait a minute, we just had a researcher here that was researching this. And I will go back because I keep records of researchers, their contact information in case I come across something. And I'll contact them and say, we just got this collection of records in. There's some records here for your family. Are you interested? And of course, they always are. So always leave contact information, your surnames with the archives. Get a name and contact information of someone at the archive so you can have a point of contact. Develop a relationship, especially if you're going to be doing research in a particular area on a particular family for a period of time. I have a family that was out of Wyandotte County, Ohio, and they lived there for over 100 years before some of the family members started moving away. And so I developed a lot of relationship with the repositories and archivists and librarians in that area because I had 100 years of research that I needed to do in that area. So make sure and do that. But remember, it's not all online. So contact or visit an archive today. And thank you so much for attending this presentation. Please visit my blog, A Genealogist in the Archives. And also you can find me on Facebook, The Archive Lady. And then if you want to email me with any questions after we're done today, please do. I love to hear from those who've attended my presentations.